I've talked before about the general problem that there's just not enough money in comics. And I think that's true of a bunch of different places: the marketing, the production, but also the creators and the pay. So, what's the solution to that? And if you just doubled the money, would it help? Would we see kind of better behavior, better content, more investment? Would anything significantly change? Well, let's talk about that. Hey, everybody, this is Perch. I get a lot of really good emails. In fact, I should just stop going to Twitter or social media completely because the kinds of emails and messages I get are really well thought through. In fact, many times they're intimidating because I get people write paragraphs of really well thought out stuff. And so I need to gather on those and do videos about that. Obviously, not while driving. But I got this question from a creator, and he can choose to out himself in the comments if he wants to, but it's a good one. And the question is basically this: if Disney, Time Warner, doubled the money going into Marvel or DC, meaning doubling the paychecks of both people in the offices and the creator page rates, would anything change? Or would it not matter at all? Or it would still be hit and miss, or it'd still be so-so? Would the customer base still be shrinking? It's a really good question, and it's a good question because it's a hard question. There's a lot of details there, and of course, I don't have the answer, but I have an opinion, and this is at least in my view. The short answer is no. I don't think anything would change, and I say that for a couple reasons. First off, I believe the pay in general for the full-time employees, the quote-unquote office people, and the page rates are more than they're way further down than just doubling solving the problem. I think that if you look at kind of what executives in game companies or tech companies make, it's usually 4 to 5 times what's going on in the comic business for office jobs. So I don't know if you've just doubled, but forget the doubling part. Let's just go with the money was raised. Would it help? Well, here's an interesting perspective on things. I think that when you pay people, when they have a salary, there's kind of multiple forms to it. There's the base, which is, just kind of what you can expect month to month. Then there's the security behind the money, meaning you may be getting paid a lot, but are you worried that the company's about to go out of business, that that pay may stop? And this is a problem for a lot of startups where they sometimes bring in kind of big guns to be part of the company to get some good valuation or to get good investment, but it's a very short-term leash. And in some cases, people mentally just get comfortable with this idea that maybe they're working for they have enough funding for a year and a half. And they know at the end of the year and a half, 9 times out of 10, they're going to run out of money and they're going to go off and do something else. But during that period of time, they may demand a $360,000 to $500,000 in kind of executive salary, and they just they try and make something big happen. And in many cases, VCs and investment firms will give to those people because they have a track record of being able to make something pop. And so maybe you go and you raise $5 million up front, and that gives you a year and a half runway of business. And you're hoping that by hiring really, really expensive, really bright people, that they can do enough to generate some IP or some patents or some kind of buzz that'll allow you to go raise $50 to $100 million. And then that's the way it can kind of go. So that's a different way to do it. But the motivation is really into kind of making something happen for the company. Generally speaking, base is such a thing where you may have some motivation to kind of keep your job, but you don't necessarily have incentive to do much more beyond that. Now, comic books, I think, have an interesting problem with where they currently are at, in that you need to certainly try and keep your job. You need to also try and move the ball forward, meaning you need to put in your investment, your creative energies into something in order to grow the business, much of which that money won't ever come to you. There's no long-term incentive. So let's say you're paid $50,000 a year or $500,000 a year, it's still capped. So if you create the next Harry Potter, you're still going to be leaving a lot of money on the table. And people inside kind of realize this. It's one difference between a creative field and, say, working for a bank. With the bank, you're able to come in, you're able to turn off some parts of your creative brain, you're able to turn out that great idea you have in your mind. But when you're in the creative field, it's kind of assumed that that great idea you have in your mind is going to actually come out and you're going to deliver it to the employer, to the company. It's one of those things in comics where, you talk to many creators, they'll say, I have one or two ideas in the back of my head I wouldn't give away to Marvel, or I wouldn't give away to DC. I keep those for myself, and I'll do an independent comic, or I'll do something on my own where I can keep the upside. But if you're Marvel and DC, if I'm at the executive level, I'd be thinking, how can I incentivize the people who work in my companies to actually bring their A game, to bring their best ideas to the table? Because I think it's a slippery slope where, as soon as somebody starts holding ideas back because they don't feel like they're being compensated enough to really bring them out, I think that list of great ideas starts growing larger and larger and larger. You can't help it. Every time you come across a really great idea for a character, you now are having this inner thought process of, well, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to give this away? Or should I keep it? And should I try it for myself later? And the sad part about it is a lot of these great ideas never go anywhere. People have them in their minds, but then they never actually get around to doing that independent comic, that thing for themselves. Opportunity never presents itself, so this great idea dies. There was, I want to say Roy Thomas, but I know John Byrne has actually mentioned things like this in the past as well, where there were a ton of great ideas that just kind of came and went and were lost because they fell into that trap. So what's the way you compensate? Well, if raising base doesn't necessarily improve the behavior, then what about incentives? And I mentioned this on another video, but I really think this is an area that would be powerful. And it's an interesting strategic advantage for Marvel and DC in particular, because they do have Time Warner and Disney as their parents, and that's stock. Now, stock is an interesting motivator for people because it does kind of two things. One, there's the stock that you get as a grant. So let's say you're Sean Gordon Murphy, and you've pitched the Batman White Knight universe, and it exceeded expectations. It did really good. So we want Murphy to come on and do a second version of this, a second run. So we give him 10,000 shares of stock. Now, that does two things mentally for people. One, it's money. It's money in your pocket, and there's some risk to it. If the company tanks or does poorly, then your stock value goes down. So that's why you wouldn't want to be paid only in stock. But as a bonus, it's extra money you're not giving, and it also gives you the ability to kind of control what that money does. This is a good motivator for comics because not only are you encouraged to do your own thing well, but stock is there's a lot of things that play into stock. By the way, there's one big kind of gotcha in all this I'll get to in a minute. You may have already thought of, but if stock rises from group efforts, so you're going to be more inclined to maybe conduct yourself a little bit better on social media. Maybe you're going to promote projects that aren't your own because all boats rise. If all boats rise, stock price goes up, you make more money, even if it's not your direct creative contribution. And if you wind up making something that's just a home run, you bring your best idea to the table, well, then you're having a direct impact in that stock. You get more volume of stock, and that stock price goes up. So the combination of the two can be quite powerful. It's why in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, you have people who get to be, multimillionaires very, very young in their life, in their early 20s, because they were at the right company, the right time, they got stock, and they wound up hitting it big. I think that comics is desperately in need of something like that, an incentive program that both benefits you as an individual and also benefits you if the company as a whole does well. Because one of the problems we have in comics in general is at times it's a little bit too mercenary, and at times if it doesn't directly impact them, people are willing to take shots at other things within the company or not help things that need help because, they're not compensated for any of it. So what does it matter? People have detached the idea that the company's success really hooks onto them. Now, I said there was one gotcha. The one gotcha here, of course, is that Disney and Time Warner, AT&T, they both have, massive businesses of which comics is just a tiny fraction. So again, let's say you are Sean Gordon Murphy and you make the White Knight universe and it sells really, really well. Well, the impact to AT&T stock is still probably negligible. You'd have to run insane numbers before you actually started to, your actions impact that stock. That's one of the problems of having too big of a parent company. However, there are solutions to this. Sometimes, parent companies have subsidiaries where they have their own stock, and there's a metric that's applied there, and you can always do private placement. There's a bunch of ways to handle it. But to the original source question, if there was just more money in this business, would it help? Well, the short answer is it would have to be a lot more money, but there would be value in basically giving the creators, giving the people in the office, giving everybody more of a feeling like this was something worth fighting for and something worth keeping. The problem with a lot of the fights and the squabbles and the whisper networks and all that kind of stuff is that they're playing over change. So all of the comments, and you go to some of my videos, you look down the comments and you see people just fighting and raging on both sides. They're still squabbling over close to nothing. And one of the things that honestly surprises me, and somebody kind of called me out and called me a dick about it because I said I didn't want advertising revenue. And they said, with your subscriber count, you're making money people want. I'd hate to break it to you guys, but you guys don't want this money. You can't live off the money I make on YouTube. It's not enough. It's not even close to enough. And for that matter, if you just run the numbers and you look at even the bigger guys, even like Richard Meyer with his channel, it's not enough money to live on. It's money. It's great. Nobody just, hands back money, but we're squabbling over pennies for the most recognizable brands in the world. And that's an imbalance. And that's what causes some of this frustration. So I do think that having more money in the system is a good idea, but I also think that money should be applied in different ways. I think definitely some base pay should be raised. If you're an editor and you're living in New York City and you're making sub $45,000, which some are, you're being screwed. You can't live off that. You're not going to bring your A game, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy for anything. It's going to attract kind of people who can't get a job elsewhere, and you have no pride in your work. If you're being paid that level, it's not healthy for anyone. And that's just no good. But on top of that, on top of a base salary raise, we need to have some level of incentive program so that when things go well, there's encouragement, there's financial reward, and it goes to the entire team. I think that is a really big deal, and it would foster a better sense of community within the business where you don't have people kind of stabbing themselves in the back or each other in the back because they want to grow the overall pie. I think comics absolutely can make more money. I think that what's interesting to see, and this is where if you are opposed to a lot of the crowdfunding or anything else, I think you have to turn off that emotional side of your brain for a moment. Look at the amount of money that is being raised by Super Chats and Patreon and all these different formats and say, okay, there's people who are willing to spend money for whatever reason. Maybe it's for ideological reasons. Maybe it's to stick it to Gail Simone. Maybe who knows why they're paying their money, but they're doing it for some reason. So therefore, there is cash to tap into, and there's a market to tap into. So how do you do that in a way that's repeatable, that is sustainable over time, that isn't tied to being angry about something, that is actually tied to value? The money is there. It's just a matter of how do you extract it and how you do it in a fair way, and are you willing to listen to people outside the industry? I think the interesting and what I love about this question, thank you for writing me. You're an awesome guy. You always are an awesome guy, and I just love talking to you. The person who wrote me this mail, not enough people are asking this question. And to me the weirdest part. And I don't have an answer to that. Why aren't more people working to solve this problem? It's not great for the majority. Now, there's a handful of executives in both companies that are doing okay and doing well. But even there, when you're a high-level steering executive for the biggest properties in the world, you should be making 8 figures. Honestly, that's what other industries are making. Are you making that? I know they're not, but they should. So why don't we all want to make more money? And it doesn't have to be a greedy, slimy thing. It's just being compensated fairly for success. There's nothing gross or bad about that. And I think that's one of those things that has to change in the industry. More money in the industry would definitely help. But I think it's more complex than just if we raise salaries, it will help much. I think there's a bunch of different factors that all kind of have to fall into place. And the last piece I'd say on is there's some people that even if you started paying them a lot more, they're so not used to this better world, they would reject it. And it would almost be self-sabotage. And there's probably some people in the industry that need to make their way out of it, and for better or worse. That's the way it is. But awesome question. Thank you very much for sending it. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about more money in comics. How should it fit? Where does it apply? What are the ins and outs? And who knows? Maybe we'll solve a key part of comics. That would be awesome. Hey, subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on the social media. Send me an email at comics with an S Perch at Gmail. And thanks for listening.